An elderly man with slow, careful steps holds an old black and white photograph close to his chest. What hidden legacy does it hold? He clutches it as if it were a piece of his very soul. The only image he has left of his brother's in arms, and now he's about to leave it where he believes it truly belongs. As he tries to place the photo at the Navy Memorial, two security guards watch him with suspicion. One of them steps in and blocks his way, speaking in a firm, dismissive tone. "Sir, we can't accept just anything from just anyone. Not every donation is welcome here." But they had no idea what that photograph really meant, and even less, who that man truly was. Let's dive into this story. Albert Lawson lives on the outskirts of Dayton, Ohio. Silence has long been his closest companion. At 85, Albert is a former U.S. Marine sergeant who served in Vietnam. He came home with medals he never displayed, scars he never showed, and stories he never told. He never married, never had children. He worked as a janitor at Dayton High School for over 40 years. He'd arrive early, leave late, and made sure the hallways stayed clean, and the classroom stayed in order. Students knew him as Mr. Albert, a kind man, even when he found graffiti on the walls or trash scattered across the floor. Teachers respected him for his quiet dedication and the mysterious dignity he carried like an invisible cloak. It's been a few years since he retired, and Albert has been living with heart problems, the result of years of untreated high blood pressure. As his symptoms worsened, something began to weigh heavily on him. Something time had never managed to erase or soften. The deep aching need to make sure his squad brothers were remembered. They deserved to be honored. Their stories needed to be preserved for generations who never knew war, but needed to understand its cost. And Albert could feel with growing urgency that his own time was running out. The decision came on a rainy Thursday. He was sitting at the kitchen table staring at the photograph when a familiar pain crossed his chest. Not a physical pain, but one that came from deep within. A pain born from the realization that he was failing his brothers. They had trusted him to come home, to live for all of them. But for what? To die alone in a quiet house, taking their memories with him to the grave. No, they deserved more than that. He had to do something before it was too late. Before the last living witness to their lives fell silent forever. The Navy Memorial was a 2-hour bus ride from his home. He had never been there, though he had known about it for decades. He always found excuses not to go. Not enough money for the trip. Nothing decent to wear. But the truth was simpler and harder. He was afraid. Afraid of facing the memories. Now the fear had changed. It wasn't fear of remembering anymore. It was fear of forgetting. Fear that his brothers' names would vanish into the fog of time. Could this forgotten hero's tribute change everything? The next morning, Albert got ready. He slipped the photograph into the inside pocket of his jacket, close to his heart, like a physical promise that he would never leave them behind. The Navy Memorial rises majestically against the blue sky, its white marble columns gleaming in the sunlight. American flags flutter in the wind, creating a patriotic symphony of fabric against metal poles. Albert stops at the wide entrance steps, feeling a mix of pride and adrenaline rushing through his veins. He watches families climbing the stairs, groups of students on field trips, younger service members walking briskly. He didn't feel like he belonged here. Or at least that's what he thought as he caught his own reflection in the glass doors. He takes a deep breath, adjusts his cap, and pushes open the heavy entrance doors. The inside of the memorial is even more striking. Polished marble reflects the light of crystal chandeliers. Walls display photographs of famous battles, flags from historic military units, vintage uniforms, and statues of soldiers encased in glass. At the reception desk, a young woman around 25 greets him with a practiced smile that doesn't quite reach her eyes. She wears a navy blue blazer and a small name tag that reads, Emily, receptionist. "Good morning, sir. How can I help you?" Her voice is polite, but there's a barely hidden impatience. Albert removes his cap with trembling hands and holds it to his chest. "Good morning, miss. I'd like to visit the memorial and make a donation." As he signs the guest book, Emily asks, "What kind of donation?" Albert carefully pulls the photograph from the inside pocket of his jacket. His hands shake slightly as he lays it on the marble counter. This photo, it's of my squad in Hanoi, Vietnam. They all died in combat. I'm the only one who made it back. Emily glances briefly at the photo. 7 young sailors smiling at the camera, Navy uniforms on, the Vietnamese jungle in the background. To her, it's just one more war relic among hundreds that come through the memorial. "Oh, how interesting," she says in the tone people use when children show them drawings. "But for historical donations, you'll need to speak with our acquisitions department. They're not in today. They're open Monday through Thursday, 9 to 5. You'll need to schedule a visit." Albert feels the first sting of not belonging. But this photo is really important. They were my brothers. Emily lets out a faint sigh. "I understand, sir, but we have procedures. Donations must be evaluated, authenticated, and documented. We can't just accept any item that shows up." 2 middle-aged men approach quickly. They're Paul and Rick, the building's security team. They carry the worn expressions of men who deal with situations daily. They size Albert up with the trained eye of those who judge people in seconds. Paul steps forward first, one hand resting near the walkie-talkie on his belt. "Is there a problem here, Emily? This gentleman wants to make a donation, but he's not understanding our procedures." Rick looks at the photograph on the counter with thinly veiled contempt. It's just an old photo." Albert feels his face flush, but tries to keep his composure. "Please, gentlemen, this photo is very important. These men gave their lives for me, for our country." Paul and Rick exchange a look. That silent communication shared between co-workers. "Look, sir," Paul says, "everyone who walks in here has a story. Stories don't automatically make something national heritage." Albert tries to explain again, his words tumbling out in desperation. "No, you don't understand. I was there. I saw when these men." He can't finish the sentence. Instead, he grabs the photo and tries to walk deeper into the memorial to place it where he believes it truly belongs. Paul steps in and blocks his path, voice turning firm. "Sir, we can't accept just anything from just anyone. Not every donation is welcome here. The process is simple," he continues. "You call the acquisitions department, set up an appointment, bring documentation proving the item's authenticity, and fill out the necessary paperwork. If it's approved, then we can consider the donation." Albert is now being gently but firmly escorted toward the exit. Other visitors begin to watch, some with awkward curiosity. A family with young children stops and whispers to each other. A group of college students discreetly record the scene on their phones. "But I don't have any documentation," Albert pleads as he's led toward the door. "All I have is this photo. It's all that's left." "Then I'm afraid there's nothing we can do," Rick says with a practiced tone of false sympathy. At the door, Paul hands him a generic memorial business card. "Call the acquisitions department on Monday. They can walk you through the steps." Albert takes the card and slips it into his pocket. You don't understand. These men were heroes." "I'm sure they were, sir," Paul replies, already disengaged. "But even heroes need proper documentation." The heavy glass doors close behind Albert with a sound that feels final. Like the lid of a coffin sealing shut, he stands motionless on the marble steps, clutching the photograph to his chest. Around him, life continues as if nothing happened. No one really sees him. Albert slowly descends the steps, each one a small defeat. He boards the bus back to Dayton in complete silence. For the entire 2-hour ride, he doesn't look out the window. He keeps his eyes fixed on the photograph resting on his lap. That night, Albert sits at his dining room table and returns the photograph to its usual place. He stares at it for a long time until tears blur the faces of the young men. "I'm sorry," he whispers. But Albert didn't know the story was only just beginning. He didn't know that sometimes recognition comes when you least expect it. Will a colonel's revelation turn this rejection into redemption? The following week, retired Colonel Linda Reynolds arrives at the Navy Memorial. As the chief curator, Linda carries the sacred responsibility of preserving stories. Every piece in the collection represents a life cut short, a dream left behind, or a sacrifice that must never be forgotten. She doesn't see artifacts. She sees people. She doesn't organize exhibitions. She builds bridges between generations. From her office on the top floor, large windows offer a panoramic view of the memorial grounds. Every morning, she walks through the main galleries to make sure everything is in order for another day of visitors. She also makes it a point to review the visitor log from the previous week, keeping track of the flow of guests. Linda firmly believes that every person who walks through those gates deserves attention. Names tell stories. Her finger moves quickly down the list of signatures until near the bottom of a page, one name makes her heart stir. Albert Lawson, U.S. Navy veteran. She reads the name 3 times. It can't be. It can't be the same Albert Lawson and her brother Michael used to talk about during those long sleepless nights after returning from Vietnam with a scar across his chest and nightmares that lasted for years. With suddenly trembling hands, Linda rushes back to her office and powers on her computer. Her fingers fly across the keyboard, pulling up the Navy's historical records stored in her personal database. She types Albert Lawson and waits, her heart pounding. The results appear and tears instantly well up in her eyes. Albert Lawson, rank sergeant, United States Navy, Operations Hanoi, Republic of Vietnam. During a high-intensity enemy ambush in 1968 near Hanoi, Sergeant Albert Lawson demonstrated extraordinary bravery when his unit was surrounded by enemy forces. Sergeant Lawson repeatedly exposed himself to heavy hostile fire to rescue wounded soldiers trapped in open terrain. Commendations, Silver Star and Bronze Star with V device for valor. Linda closes her eyes and remembers Michael Reynolds, her older brother. She remembers the 21-year-old who came home from Vietnam with a scar over his left chest where grenade shrapnel nearly pierced his heart. She remembers the nights he woke up screaming, soaked in sweat. Over the years, when he dared to speak about the war, Michael would share fragments of a story that sounded like something out of a movie. The story of a sergeant who appeared like a ghost in the middle of chaos, who carried him on his back while bullets zipped through the air like angry bees and saved him from certain death. A hero who asked for only one thing in return, that Michael live a life worth the sacrifice. And Michael did. He got married, had 3 children, became the grandfather of 7 grandchildren, who grew up hearing tales of the guardian angel who once saved Grandpa Michael's life. Michael passed away 3 years ago. He never got the chance to find Albert and thank him or share those memories. And now, decades later, Albert had signed the guest book at her memorial. Linda grabs the phone with shaking hands and dials security. Security desk. Rick speaking. Rick, this is Colonel Reynolds. I need everything you have on a visitor named Albert Lawson. He was here last Friday. I need it all immediately. There's a pause on the line. Albert Lawson, the old guy who wanted to donate a photo. Linda's heart stops. He wanted to donate what? An old photo. Said it was of his squad. They'd all died. Paul and I explained the process, but he didn't have any paperwork. We had to ask him to leave. Linda feels a wave of nausea rise from her stomach to her throat. You sent him away? Well, not exactly sent away. We explained the official procedure. Call acquisitions, schedule an appointment, bring documentation, and all that. Linda hangs up without another word. Her hands are trembling uncontrollably as she searches through phone records for any listing under Albert Lawson. There are several listed in Ohio. She starts dialing them one by one, hands still shaking, voicemail, wrong numbers, frustrated strangers, until finally a calm voice answers. Hello, Mr. Albert Lawson. Yes, this is he. Who's calling? Linda takes a deep breath, trying to hold back the emotion rising in her chest. My name is Linda Reynolds. I'm the curator of the Navy Memorial. Were you here last Friday? There's a long pause. Albert is likely wondering if he's in trouble, if someone has filed a complaint against him. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry if I caused any sort of trouble. Mr. Lawson, Linda says, her voice breaking just slightly. Did you know a soldier named Michael Reynolds in Vietnam? The silence on the other end becomes almost physical. Linda can hear Albert's heavy breathing. Michael Reynolds. Albert whispers. The kid from Chicago. Now it's Linda who can't speak. Tears stream freely down her cheeks as she confirms. Yes. Michael Reynolds was my older brother. Your brother. He was an incredible young man. How is he? Linda smiles through her tears. He lived a beautiful life, Mr. Lawson. He got married, had children and grandchildren. He's no longer with us, but he lived every day you gave him when you saved his life. On the other end, Linda can hear Albert crying. Decades of unspoken emotion finally breaking free. Mr. Lawson, Linda says gently. I need to see you. Please come back to the memorial. But this time, you'll be welcomed the way you deserve. The next morning, Linda arrived at the memorial an hour earlier than usual. She had called an emergency meeting with the entire security and reception staff and told them everything about Albert. Emily lowered her head in disbelief. Paul and Rick swallowed hard, their faces pale. Colonel, we didn't know. Paul said quietly. Our job here is to protect and honor these memories, Linda said firmly. Not to discard them. Linda took charge of every detail personally. Fresh flowers in the main lobby. Special coffee prepared in the executive lounge. The memorial's finest conference room reserved exclusively for Albert. She invited the memorial's director and reached out to members of the press. Albert arrived at exactly 10 a.m. He carried the photograph in his inside pocket right over his heart, just as he always had. But this time, when the glass doors opened, a welcoming committee was waiting for him. Linda stepped forward first, wearing her full navy dress uniform, medals shining under the chandelier lights. She extended her hand with reverence. Sergeant Lawson, Paul said, his voice filled with sincere emotion. I want to apologize for what happened last week. It was an honor to have you here and we failed to recognize that. Albert was speechless for a moment. Then he extended his hand to shake Paul's. No hard feelings, gentlemen. You were doing your job protecting this place. There's nothing to forgive. Sergeant Lawson, Linda said gently. Welcome to your memorial. Albert stood completely stunned by the ceremony. Linda led him through the memorial herself. Visitors stopped and watched the solemn procession. A Navy colonel personally escorting an elderly man through the halls. Children on school field trips whispered to their teachers. Who is that important man? Inside the conference room, Albert finally took the photograph from his pocket. These were my brothers, he said softly, placing the picture gently on the polished mahogany table. Linda examined each young face in the photo as if they were precious gems. Tell me about them, Sergeant, she said. Tell me everything. And Albert did. For the first time in decades, he shared their stories. He spoke of them not just as soldiers, but as brothers, as men who deserved to be remembered. The photograph was officially accepted into the memorial's permanent collection, given a place of honor in a special display case within the main gallery. As he left the memorial, Albert Lawson sat quietly on the steps outside the grand entrance. He closed his eyes for a moment, as if finally he could rest. In his mind, the image of the photo now safely framed in the gallery. In his heart, the certainty that those young soldiers had found the immortality they always deserved. We did it, boys, Albert whispered to himself. We finally did it. You're home now and so am I. If you enjoyed this story, let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear what you think. And don't forget to click the like button and subscribe to Graceful Valor Stories so you won't miss what's coming. Subscribe to Graceful Valor Stories, where quiet strength is celebrated, and every hero story finds a voice.